Hurry, Aaron, hurry. They're not liking the jokes.
Why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9.
You got to follow that up with a waka waka waka.
No rapping for me this year, guys. Hi, good morning, thank you. Let me see if I can pull this out. Okay, great. So in the next 45 minutes, we are going to cook up the perfect search engine. It's going to be that easy. So everyone from Google, Yahoo, Bing, et al., take notes, because by the end of this, you're going to have your product roadmap, and you'll be able to come back in May and hopefully have it released, and you'll be winning the battle. Can we get the slides up, and I'll introduce these folks. Text in your answers. And here we go. So yes, we're going to head into the lab and cook up the perfect search engine right now. And let's meet the chefs. We've got Alan Ostetek, who's the president of Resolution Media, a leading search agency under the Omnicom umbrella. We have Jason Lembeck, CEO of Datapop, who makes ads that you want to click. Is that the tagline? Is that the tagline? Right on. I like it. I dig it.
Also known as the guy who gets to work with Frank the Tank.
Yes. And then we have the man who does us all the favor by just letting us call him Vu, so that we don't have to try and butcher his entire name. But Vu is the director of acquisition for Travelocity. He oversees paid search, among other channels. So what I'd like to do is first start with the ingredients of a perfect search engine. And it's a little bit arbitrary, and you got to start somewhere. But this is kind of what we assembled when we were talking about it before, and we did a little pre-survey. So you've got your Drano, right? You've got your antihistamine, and then you want to break it up into two main areas as far as how we're thinking about it. There's the user experience side, which is how people interact with the search engine. And then we have the relevancy algorithm. So what's happening behind the scenes to return what would be the perfect results. So we're going to go through each one of these one by one, and I'm going to throw out a question that I asked these guys in advance. We'll let you guys in the audience vote on it as if you were the engineer in the lab deciding how to weight various factors, and then we'll see how these guys voted, and we'll let them try and share some rationale for why and how they did it. So we're going to look at the format for how queries are submitted. We're going to look at the integration of the search results pages, meaning what assets are displayed and returned. And then we're going to look at how you interact with the search engine as another proxy. And then when we shift over to the algo, we're going to look at on-page elements. We're going to look at links, social signals, personalization elements, and contextual signals. And we're going to try and rank order all of those. And by the end of it, we will have the perfect search engine. So, like I said, we did a survey in advance, and each of these guys had to do a scale of 1 to 10 for a couple of these different factors, and then we'll show their results now. So for user experience, starting with query format, I asked these guys to rank 4 following methods for submitting search queries. Being able to search using images, right? So think, either taking a picture and having that query database. Audio, if you think about Shazam or other apps where the search is initiated by you just sort of holding up your device and letting the recognition of that trigger your query. Actual voice querying, and then what we have all known and love up till now is text. So I asked these guys to rank each of these 1 through 10, but we'll do a quick show of hands in the audience. If you had to pick one of these formats, you could only pick one way to interact with your search engine and submit queries. How many of you would prefer to do it via images? Okay. Oh, we got 2. Okay. Audio. All right. Min and back. Voice. Okay. And text. All right. So voice seems to be the winner. People would prefer to voice over their queries. And that also came out ahead when I pulled these guys. Jason in particular was big on voice. He also kind of copped out and put a 10 also for text. And then we had Vu going with text as his highest ranked and Alan as voice. And then one interesting piece here, Jason really poo-pooed audio. So you might want to short Shazam. But guys, what do you? Let's start with you, Jason. Right. So you had kind of the outliers here. When you're thinking about how you want to query your search engine, why voice, why text, and why don't you give a crap about audio?
Yeah, I guess I would start with, and this connects back to what Rob said earlier about, how he engages with search through different applications, through different modes. And, in my mind, the thing that's so powerful about where search is today and where, ultimately search needs to go is it needs to be ubiquitous, and it needs to be just dead straight simple. And so for me, I look at text as, I don't think that goes away. I think wherever you are, that's going to be kind of the natural way that most people search, especially since they've been trained over the last 10 years to do it that way. So that's why I couldn't choose between the two. But then obviously voice is big and only getting bigger. I think voice, Siri, some of the stats I've seen is 1 in 5 Siri searches are a total train wreck. So it's a 20% fail rate right now. But 4 out of 5 actually get you what you want in terms of either finding information or doing interesting activities. So, and that's just getting started, right? You think about where that's going. I think that'll be a main interface for consumers. And then Shazam, I like it. I like the concept, but I go back to that point of it's got to be in the stream of what you're doing, simple, et cetera. And if you have to pull out your phone, click the thing, when you see the logo, it's too many steps in my mind for that becoming a more ubiquitous way to interface with this system.
And Vu, your top choice was text. Are you just a fingers kind of guy?
No, that's more like a demographical choice. Because when you're a foreigner having a thick accent, it's really difficult when some of these devices have hard time understanding what you're actually talking to them. And I've been having hard time with that anyway. So Siri didn't really work for me as much as it probably worked for others. Text is always going to be the ultimate, especially if you're doing these searches in multiple languages. That's just inevitable. And audio, as mentioned, it just happens during the streaming piece. But one thing that I'd like to point out is the other methods of query formats, which I've been enjoying a lot because I'm a gaming person. The gestures and pins and a bunch of other things based on your activity. So I don't know if you guys have used it, but there's a Search a Sketch app for Yahoo that actually uses Google Maps. So all you do is just sketch an area on a map, and then it gives you the search results, local search results for a certain destination. So that's something that I do enjoy. And the same thing with, I believe, there's Bing Scouts. It basically detects your location and gives you these local options that are around you where you can eat or do certain activities. So I think the other formats that are not mentioned here are going to be also picking up shortly.
Ellen, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. First, a little bit about getting into the mind of Aaron. So last week, Aaron sent us out this survey, and of course, last night around 12:05, just past midnight, he gave us all our results again and said, hey, you guys, remember what you answered, right? Because I'm going to ask you about this tomorrow. So I thought that was interesting. But when he gave the survey last week, instead of just answering for myself, what I tried to do was, when you see my answers, a lot of them are based on some of the colleagues I'd asked, but probably more importantly, I asked my wife, a few of my friends, my mom, because it's really about consumers. And I think a lot of people in the room here were kind of at one end of the spectrum of what a consumer is for search. So, a lot of my answers are based on that. And, but, what I'd say, the reason I chose voice is the high end. I'll give you kind of 3 analogies or 3 things to think about. First off, you mentioned Siri, and but also, Google's all of Google's latest Android phones. I have one myself, and about 6-7 months ago, I really started using voice search and voice to text more frequently. I really love it. A lot of my friends have been starting to use it, and I think that's the future. If you think about the past, if anyone remembers the show Knight Rider with Kit, right? What was that? It was all voice, right? And Kit gave you all the good answers back. If you go into the future, if you think of a Star Trek, it was all voice. And even if you think earlier in the year with Watson, IBM's Watson, trying to beat Alex Trebek, it was voice. So, I think it's a natural thing. For thousands and thousands of years, humans have talked, and I think we're going to move back towards that over the next few years.
Cool. All right, let's now move on to integration as far as what assets get returned for any given query. And I know this might be like asking you, which of your kids do you love the most? I didn't ask them to choose between them. I just asked them to rank order them. But I'll ask you guys in the audience to choose. If you had a search engine that could only return one category of assets, and it's between the ones listed here, what would it be? So how many of you, if you had to choose, your search engine could only give you one set of results, how many would you choose that it would return products? Okay, news. A couple people. All right, not surprisingly, Ken, publisher of MediaPost, chose news. Maps. We got 2 hands. Video. Okay, 3 or 4. Images. Another 3 or 4. Jeff, I said you can only choose one. Websites. Okay. Let's see what these guys thought. And they were with you. Like I said, with these guys, they didn't have to choose just one. So Vu prefed products, news, and maps. Alan's top choice was maps, and Jason went with the crowd and websites. And then our outlier here was Alan, who said products to him was one of the lower ones.
You don't like to sell stuff?
Did that come from your mom, Alan, or what happened there? She preferred a shop in store?
Yeah, I guess I was looking more like, in the last presentation from Michael, if you look at the mobile experience, I think one of the things that, and it relates to products too, I think as we're moving towards a more mobile society, I think maps have a long way to go. Michael showed the example of, in the mall, kind of some of the Google's things they're doing in the future to actually give a better user experience. And if we're headed to a mobile world, I think maps are kind of a nice visual way to help describe and drive an end game like selling products and or moving away from kind of a website-oriented world.
Vu, you pref the top 3. What was your thinking there?
Well, I was selfishly thinking about, since I'm an e-commerce guy, right? I need to choose the shortest path that I can actually make anyone purchase something. So that's why I prefer that. But at the same time, I'm kind of getting tired of going into the details of the contents of each and every website and picking out which website actually has the quality content that I'm looking for. And I would prefer that actually that information is dissected out of the websites and presented to me as shortcuts instead of me going into each and every website and figuring out, okay, is this the right product? Can I read the description? Or can I just get these products, news, and maps within the search results set that I don't need to drill into websites and then spend more time drilling through different content?
Wouldn't that be bad for your business, though, if all that could be done on the results page and not at Travelocity.com?
I'm sure we can talk about a revenue model that would work for both the search engines and the websites. I mean, content is the king, right, still. So, and search engines need that content, and I'm sure everyone can work on a revenue model where it could be beneficial for both parties. I mean, at the end of the day, this is gonna shorten the amount of time that somebody's actually gonna be spending on either search engines or the websites. So,
Jason?
Yeah, I kind of fell in the, actually, I voted pretty heavily for all these kind of in the 8 range for the other 4 in the Times Square bucket. Like I think in the U.S., the engines have been more conservative in terms of what they bring into in terms of the assets into the search query results set. If you go to other markets like Asia, you get a great blend, a really interesting blend of all of these things because they're still, in essence, guessing what your intent is and what you want to do with that intent. And so, I'm with you in terms of the websites, generally and where that needs to go. But, you still have to have websites because even if you guess great on video and news and products related to a query, somebody still might want to go a little deeper and explore on a website. So I was like Jeff over there. I had a hard time choosing between all these, but in the end I ended up with websites.
And so, of course, in the real world, you don't have to make the choice. And so one of the ways to cut through this then is to think about how you can toggle between or choose or self-select which of these assets you'd want returned, and that's where we get into the interaction with the search engine results pages. And so the choices that we gave here were in terms of how your results are returned. Would you want to be offered transactions that you can immediately act upon, some sort of recommendations, a one-box answer, right? Where as opposed to a bunch of websites, the search engine tries to predict exactly what it was you wanted and give that to you right there at the top. A refinement tool, which would help you sort of slide between, show me more websites, show me more videos only, or show me things that only other males 18 to 54 liked, or show me only things that people in Chicago click the most on. or just what we know today as a bunch of links. And audience, you can only pick one. So how would you like to interact with your search results pages? How many would like to be offered transactions that you can just press a button and off you go? Nobody. Recommendations? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. All right. One box answers? Nobody trusts the engine to figure out what you need. And this might also be another case, Alan, of us being in our own little bubble here, right? Refinement tools. Okay. People like that idea. Search engine product votes, take notes. And links. How many people just want their links and you'll figure it out yourself? All right. Maybe 9 or 10. Okay. Our esteemed panel of cooks went with links. I'm guessing Jason, yeah, there you are again. The man likes it, you know. He likes what he's got.
I'm passionate about links.
It ain't broke, you know. Give him his text and his links, and
Yeah.
he's, you know, back it over, sure.
I fear the Microsoft paperclip issue, right? Like, those of you remember, what was the nick?
Clippy,
Mr.
yeah.
Clippy. That's I want to avoid Mr. Clippy in search. Sorry, Microsoft.
So these were everybody's highest.
Jason,
rank-
you can keep bashing them. They're not on the sponsor list. It's okay. John, that might get him to sponsor next year.
So again, this might be so. Meanwhile, we have Alan, whose highest rankings were transactions recommendations, which involves a little bit of the AI, artificial intelligence piece of the engines, trying to figure out where you're going with it. Why did you give more weight to those versus kind of the links that we know today?
Yeah, so this is an example from when I first answered the question to I started to do a little bit more research on this. I actually changed my answer. And I actually like the refinement tools, which is actually, I know you wrote an article recently that you're kind of leaning towards the refinement tools, which is really all of the above, right? So refinement tools is if you could have a device that allows you to, you know, if you want the answer to be links, you slide a refinement tool over to links and the answers come out as links. If you want it to be one box answers, which is kind of like Siri right now, you could have a recommendation just served up to you. So, you know, I think in general, giving the consumer choice would be the refinement tool.
Vu, what do you think? If the two ends of the spectrum are you decide what you want to see as the searcher versus the search engine doing the thinking for you, where do you fall on that spectrum?
I'd still like to choose, and not because I don't like what I'm getting in terms of result sets from the search engines, but I think that the quality is not there yet, and it's going to make the process again. I'm always thinking about how can we make this quicker, right? How can we make it less painful for the searcher? And the links are going to be informative enough, but I don't know if the information that we get in terms of recommendations and transactions are going to be there. And even when you think about the sliders, I think Yahoo tried it like years ago when they had the slider. You could actually slide like e-commerce sites versus
Informational, right.
informational sites. Even that one was like kind of sketchy because, it did kind of work, but you can still manipulate it.
But how do you square this with your earlier point on the websites and not having websites as results?
Well, you can have the links for a product, but you can have the links for a image or map or local results, but you still get to choose. But when we talk about transactions, talking about the, let's say, maybe it's going to sound like a great example, but the hotel finder of Google, right? It is one click to a transaction. But the question is that good enough? Do I get all my choices? Or with the Google Flights product, is that the right choice, knowing that consumers can still get cheaper rates, better rates across a bunch of other OTAs? Yeah. So that's why I don't think the integrity of the data is there yet, and that's why I'd like to act on the links more than, being told, okay, this is the transactional piece that you need to go forward with.
Yeah. Okay. So we're in Mountain View or we're in Redmond, and we have to decide which of these three areas we just talked about to focus on. Unless you have infinite engineers, you have to kind of choose which battles to fight. And so if you had to decide between focusing on changing the way the queries are sort of submitted, right, the format, or the assets, figuring out how to get the right assets on the page, or figuring out how to help people better interact with the search results pages. And again, if you only could pick one of these areas to focus on to build the perfect search engine, how many people in the audience would pick how you interact with the search results pages? Maybe 5. All right, how many would focus on integration? And again, that's the different types of assets that get returned for each query. Maybe 20, 30, all right? And the format as far as how you actually submit your queries? Nobody, okay, interesting, okay. So that might be, I don't think Apple's here, but that might be a note to them. Let's see what our chefs thought. Alan copped out and just put them all the same. Oh, no, point of order. The methodology got a little skewed here. I only gave these guys a 1 to 4 option instead of 1 to 10 like all the others. So Alan just kind of punted right down the middle. And Jason went at interaction and format. And Vu prefed interaction and integration. So Alan, are they all important? Is that kind of your point? Or?
Yeah, well, I think they're all important, but quite honestly, when I had trouble with this question, I didn't have a good answer for it. I think if I were to answer now, I think integration is important. As Jason mentioned, the U.S. has a little bit of a ways to go to, as you mentioned earlier, has a bit of ways to go compared to some other countries in terms of making sure that universal search, really is kind of the wave of the future and knowing what consumers want. So I'd probably pick integration, but again, I'm a little bit mixed on this one.
Guys, I know it's not a perfect question to build the perfect search engine, but so Jason, nobody in the audience, if they had to choose, would have chosen the format or the way that the queries are submitted. Why is that so important to you?
Yeah, I guess this is where my love-hate relationship shows up with Mr. Clippy. I mean, ultimately, there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of how you interact with the results once you get there, and we all are, I think, overwhelmed by the millions of links that you get back in terms of result sets and a number of queries. And on the consumer side, when you talk to normal human beings, when they think about search, that's an overwhelming aspect to the search experience. So I think there's a ton of work that can go into that. And I would say, back to the earlier point of the 40% of queries happening outside of the big three, or intent signals happening outside of the big three. I think that's a spot where through apps, through other means of engaging with content for what you're looking for, I think that's where query format can really start to take off and drive some innovation.
And so what I want to get, we've been taking largely the consumer view, right, in terms of thinking what that engine would look like. I want to come back to at the end and put back on our marketer hats and say, as innovation happens in each of these, what does it mean for marketers, right? But let's put that aside for now, and let's roll into the algo piece. Oops, one click too many. All right, so for all of our SEOs in the room, if you had to choose one of these 4 areas to weight the most heavily when building a relevancy algorithm, which one would you pick? How many of you would pick recency in terms of the content when trying to weight which content bubbles up to the top? How many of you would say the number one factor is how recent that content was developed, published, shared? 3, 4, 5, okay. How about the architecture in terms of how it's built, how user-friendly it is, how easy it is to recognize that content? 8. Keyword density. How many folks just think you need to look at the keywords within that content and pull out what that content's about? 8 or 9, 10. Okay, pretty split. And title tags. Who thinks the most important thing is what the producer of that content titled that piece of content? Don't let the way I asked that skew your opinion. Thankfully, nobody raised their hand. Okay. Let's hope that none of our chefs put that first. No. Okay, good. So here we had Vu saying the most important things are the recency of the content and the architecture, how easy it is to understand what that content's about. Alan chose keyword density, and Jason was about recency. Was that your highest? Did I put the highest answers?
I think they were all 4 below. There you go.
Oh yeah. I guess there's your answer. Okay. Alan, let's start with you, kind of kicking it old school with keyword density.
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at, everyone in the room is in the search business, so certainly all these factors are important. But, if we want to make sure that, for people who are, if there's lots and lots of content out there that aren't optimized from a search perspective or don't have an SEO specialist who is, helping them to navigate the waters of how they should be coming up in search results. So I think the simplest one, if you can only choose one answer, keyword. If you write an article, if you're writing content as an example, keyword density is probably still the way to go in terms of giving you a relevant result.
Trying to figure out what that content is. Okay. And Vu, you said it's more about sort of how the content is structured and when it's published, as opposed to necessarily trying to figure out exactly what it's about.
Right. I mean, I think we're at the point where all the content that's added to any given website is the search engines realized what the website is already all about, right? And what they look at is when new content is pushed, how relevant it is, as well as how new that information is. We go through the exercise with the Hotel Finder product, where Google is basically asking us to push the latest price for a certain product. And if our ranking goes below like 95% accuracy between when the searcher is looking for versus when they land on the site, then those properties fall off the grid. So that recent information, the most updated information, is becoming more and more important. And from a relevancy perspective too, I mean, you come to a website, you see one thing about a product, and then, or you see it on the search engines, and then you come to the site, and then that information is different, which can be pricing or inventory and such. So those are the things that I think are changing rapidly. The more recent information is, the more importance it's gaining. And the architecture is, I think it's it has been the common element since the beginning. You have to have good architecture so that they can actually dissect that information at any given point. So,
Jason, were we missing something? If you ranked all these so low, was there a fifth that you're like, that's what we should be focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an old school search guy, so I obviously see these as important today. But if you look, and we're talking about the perfect search engine, right, and where that's going. If you look at these elements, this is the old regime. And if you think about where, we get in this later in some of the other questions, where everybody needs to go, including people who are trying to serve up results that are relevant to the end consumer, these are elements that I think they're yesterday's game.
Yeah. And to that point, I didn't clarify it enough. These are just the on-page factors, right? We're going to get into a whole section of other factors when weighting everything. But if you're just looking at the page or the piece of content itself,
and so that's one piece that we didn't really get into in the questions is I think there's the semantic technologies has been this game that's been played for decades now, or attempted to be played for decades, and I think. There's been a recent push and successful push by some of the engines and what they're doing with semantic technologies that go above and beyond keyword density, right, and really trying to understand the meaning behind a page and taking other signals that are off page, to your point, but taking the signals on the page. And I think from an on-page perspective, that's where it needs to go, because all of these things. They get to meaning, but they're on the edge of the meaning of the page and what that would.
So they were helpful for building the perfect search engine up till now, but they're not going to hold water going forward. And as long as we're stuck in the early 2000s, let's look at the next, what was typically called the off-page factor, right, and links. And so again, you have to decide if you're going to rank websites or other pieces of content based on the quantity, the volume of links pointing to that piece of content, or the quality as determined by whatever your page rank methodology is. How many of you would say it's more important how many links you have pointing to your piece of content? And how many of you would say it's more important the quality of those links? I believe we have the perfect answer, 100%. The panel agrees, and it's pretty much relative. So we don't have to spend too much time, I guess, debating this. We can probably skip to the next one unless anyone has anything important they want to share on the topic of links. Do links, well, and we'll get to it at the end, right? So we're going to go through each of these, and then the last one will be, out of all the 5 buckets, which are the most important, right? So clearly what's coming next is social signals, and at the end we'll have to decide if you're trying to weight links versus social signals, which one's more important. So we'll get there. Let's talk about those social signals. The first one is kind of it got added at the end. So let's look at the next 4, which would be other shares. So sort of any share that's not covered by a retweet, a +1, or a like. And then when I published a column, sort of specking this exercise out, one of the readers wrote back to say, hey, what you're forgetting here is the analysis of those comments and those social signals, because just because somebody, retweeted it, if it's a bad press, piece about you, that may not be a good thing that it got retweeted, or there might be a negative comment. And so sentiment analysis is kind of a layer on top of these, so it's not a perfect question to ask between them, but again, it's the imperfect exercise to build the perfect search engine, and ask anybody who works for a search engine, they'll tell you that it's not, it's an imperfect world. So if you had to choose between one of these social signals when building the perfect relevancy algorithm, how many of you would say that the most important thing is analysis of positive or negative sentiment around a social signal? Okay, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How about other shares, sort of the everything else not covered here, cop-out answer? All right, we got one copping out with me right on. Retweets. How many people think retweets are the most important social signal? 1. Do you work for Twitter? Yeah, all right. Plus ones. Google employees not allowed to answer. How many people think plus ones are the most? Come on, really? All right, I said you weren't allowed to answer, but I'm guessing you would have raised your hand. Okay. And likes. How many people think Facebook likes are the most important social signal? Maybe about 20. So not everybody answered. So I'm either losing the crowd or I didn't have the right options up there. But at any rate, let's see what you guys thought. Most popular answer was likes in terms of all you guys combined. But Vu, you really put the focus on retweets and sentiment analysis. So let's start with you as the outlier. Why did you pick those two as your most important signals?
I just decided to go with the ones I believe that, retweets is, and just because I tweet a bazillion times a day myself maybe, but I think that's the one that I see being captured a lot. Either when you have good press or bad press, but it just puts you out there. And sometimes likes can be like in the middle because of the population control that's actually pushing the like button or how the like buttons are presented. So, and my view on the plus ones is, when the survey came out, there were like a bunch of things that were still happening. So I think I would also put plus ones now on the same high scoring for my choices.
Okay.
And the sentiment analysis, positive and negative, again, they are important. And just because, we were talking about press, bad press, or good press, but I don't think there's a notion of really good and bad. As long as it's on the high end of either spectrum, it's good. It captures some audience.
Forget press. It could be people talking good or bad about your product.
Yep.
Right.
And I think that's good too, because that would be an opportunity for me to go in and fix something that I'm doing wrong. And if they're talking great about the product, then it's even better.
Go ahead, Jason.
One of the things I was going to throw in there as it relates to Twitter, and retweets is one way to look at it, but if you look at something like Bitly, this gets back to the linking question earlier, but if you look at what Bitly has, and if you can do the sentiment analysis around Bitly links, where those links are being leveraged, whether it's in a tweet, it's in Facebook, and other ways that people are starting to use it within the sites themselves, that becomes, I think, a really powerful signal that, if I think about it now on the retweets, if you broaden that out to incorporate that, I'd probably lean that way as well.
Alan, you were, out of everyone, were the highest for plus ones. You feeling the love there?
That one highest for likes, man.
Well, your answer was likes, but out of anyone else.
Yeah, I think you kind of saw it in the crowd. Like no one really knew what to answer, because I think the reality. And when I was thinking of the plus ones and likes, I was kind of thinking a blend of the two. And I know we're supposed to only answer one, but I think in reality, you almost need an algorithm or something that can take the combination of these and build a blended, way of looking at it.
When you're so let's blend it, right?
Yeah.
And now we're going to give some sort of weighted, factor to each. How would you? Let's just take Facebook, Twitter, Google+. All right, you have 100% weight to distribute among those three to give their relative importance. How would you divvy it up?
Well, I think if I had to give a percentage, I'd probably go 70% likes, 10 and 20% retweets. something like that.
Is that are you just going off of kind of consumer market share and usage?
Yeah, exactly. Just more. I would actually, whatever the percentage is for market share and usage, is probably the way to look at it right now. But you would want to. I mean, sentiment analysis. Somehow you'd want to blend that in too. So, again, it's probably an opportunity for someone to come up with a really good benchmarking tool for this.
And one thing though, and then there's just another question actually, not that I have an opinion yet, but maybe I'll have it like at the end of the panel. Would it make sense to consider each and every one of these as which one takes most effort for any user to do? I mean, we're talking about the click for plus ones and likes, probably other shares, but retweets or sentiment analysis takes more user interaction.
So therefore might be a more valuable signal.
Right, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay, so we got 10 more minutes and 3 more questions. So let's see if we can breeze through the 3 and then get any thoughts or questions from the audience. So personalization, all right? So when thinking about how you deliver results based on what you know about the person searching, here are the 2, 4, 6 areas that we outlined. Purchase history, search history, web history, the demographic of the searcher, any sort of interest or psychographic information that we know about them, or who they're connected to through the social graph. If you can only pick one of these as the most important criteria to personalize search results, how many of you would choose to personalize search results based on what you know about the purchase history, what that searcher has bought in the past? 3 or 4. How many based on what they've searched for in the past? 10, 15. The web history, what websites they visited in the past? 3 or 4. The demographics, is this person male, female, age, gender, etc.? 1 person. Interests, what you know about what these people are into? 5 or 6. And the social graph, personalized results based on who people are connected to. Chad, the social guy. All right. Cool, so pretty well split. And I think our panel was as well, bunched up all the way up near the top. So all these seem to be important. And again, this may be an exercise of not wanting or being able to choose between them. But does anyone feel strongly enough and want to call out anything here?
Go ahead.
I just and I think you actually stack rank these well for the audience even. But it's if you're trying to determine rank based on what is in the mind of the searcher, the closer you are to that, whether it's what they've purchased, what they've searched on, where they've been, I think those are the key drivers that should drive rank. I'm a kind of a curmudgeon on the social graph side of the equation, and in the sense that I think there are a couple key areas where that can help, a couple key types of queries that you're looking for, but beyond that, I'm still a little suspect on how that should drive rank overall.
And Alan, in keeping with your earlier answer about not caring much about products and search results, you were also pretty down on purchase history as being an indicator. So I think those probably things go hand in hand and might be attributed to the mom factor. Let's talk about contextual signals. So how do you...
What do you have against Alan's mom?
What's that?
What do you have against Alan's mom?
Sure, she's like... Hey,
it's an offline discussion, I guess.
Yeah, we'll just leave that. There's no good response to that.
I froze up Aaron Goldman.
Doesn't happen often.
+1 for me.
Contextual influence. If you had to look at the context of where that search is coming from, where that query is being performed, or how it's being performed, and looking at day of week, time of day, operating system, device, or location. How many of you say the most important contextual influence factor is the day of the week that search is happening? None. The time of the day that search is happening? 1. Danny? Operating system, where that search, what kind of OS that search is coming from? Okay. The device that the query is submitted on? Maybe 10 of you. And the location, where somebody is. All right, clearly the number one answer, location gets the square, and was the same with our panel here. These are all your guys' top answers, and you all picked location as your top, and Vu, you tied with device for both being most important. Jason, what's up?
Just quick question: is the Google guy in the audience still? Yeah.
Michael, did he sneak out?
Does anybody have the stat on how much of the mobile inventory is actually addressable by
Meaning,
hyperlocal?
that they know exactly where it's
Yeah,
coming from?
you can target within a mile.
Does anyone out there know the answer to that?
Well, we're running actually a couple campaigns. We're one of the beta testers. And what we're doing is we're targeting, well, the question was like what kind of radius?
Yeah, just how much of the inventory that you're bidding on in mobile can you get down to that granular level of mile radius, 5 mile radius?
Right now, my test is only within a single destination, Las Vegas, just because I know that a lot of people that do search on their mobile devices,
Frankly.
yeah, are just they're looking to book as soon as they land on the airport, and then we start serving them with these hotel results and deals and etc.
Well, let's just advance to the last question where we had to choose between all of these, and then we'll have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Oh, I forgot to show that Alan wasn't too high on the device. So, and day of week, you couldn't give a damn if it's Sunday or Tuesday, you're getting the same results. All right, so we had contextual signals, personalization, social signals, links, and on-page elements. If you have to decide among these 5, which is the most important bucket to decide what to return at the top of your perfect search engine, how many of you would say the most important thing is the contextual signals? Location, device. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. How many would say it's personalization? So it's personalizing results based on your social graph, or your web history, your purchase history, maybe about 15 to 20. How many would say out of all these, the most important thing is the social signals, the +1s, the likes, the retweets, the shares? Nobody. That's interesting. We got 1. Okay. How many would say it's the links, tried and true, the links pointing to your piece of content is still the most important? We got 1. And the on-page elements, your keywords, your title tags, your architecture, your recency, maybe 4 or 5. All right. Panel was also high on personalization. Alan, actually, your highest score was for social signals. So why don't we let you defend that, and then we'll open it up to 1 question from the audience.
Yeah, so I was for this answer, I was thinking more about the future. So as we're moving into more of a social realm where many of as you have more and more friends who you're looking at the data aggregated across your friends and what types of things they're searching on and the types of things that they like, I just think that social signals are more like human interaction, more like the Gladwell Maven, so to speak, where you can, especially on the product purchase side, which we were talking about earlier, I think a lot of people are going to want to see, what their friends or their mavens in their groups, what types of products they've purchased to help speed along the purchase path for someone who is maybe, just looking for a quick answer on something or a quick tip or a quick recommendation on a product.
Question out there. We got anybody? Okay, Craig, go ahead. Sorry, Mike.
So I'm going to move you away from consumer world and into more sort of a B2B. And I'm thinking of like issues with finding specified kinds of products or services. You look at Global Spec, just as an example, which is a portal, and you pay to play. But it's really kind of a really good source to find anything that's specific for somebody that's buying something for business uses. And the results we get from general search engines are really tough. You can't get that kind of level of detail easily. So could you guys comment on that a little bit?
Maybe let me position the question as, is the perfect search engine one search engine that is great across all verticals, or is that a pipe dream? And the perfect search engine is actually a series of search engines for each particular segment. So whether it be finding some sort of product in the B2B space, finding the perfect travel package, finding the perfect product.
I think the search engines are trying to put themselves in the middle of all these different vertical engines. So, like from the New Year's from now, you see, I don't know if you're going to be able to see companies like Global Spec or Octopart or a bunch of others that are going to be out there that are pulling your inventory and then making it available for the design engineers or what have you. I think we're going more towards in the direction that the major search engines will just be able to provide all that information to you the way that people prefer, like how they want to get the answers. I think that's where it's going. I mean, I see the same thing in the B2B electronic components. I see the same thing with travel. It's just becoming more verticalized.
So we're going to have to let Vu get the last word in based on time. The one thing we didn't really get to was sort of the marketing implications of all this, and if that perfect search engine gets built, how do we as marketers operate within it? But perhaps that's a thread that could carry through. If Esther Dyson were here, I think she'd say the remainder of the exercise is left, the remainder of the proof is left to the reader. Is that the exercise? She always likes to drop that quote from, was that, what would that, well, on that note, trying to figure out what that line was will be left as an exercise to the audience. You could tell.
You could end with a joke.
Math wasn't my strong point. Thank you all. Let's thank our panel for participating.